Hello and welcome to COM300 Interprofessional Communication. You're watching all about week 3, the video lecture. My name is Dr. Jonina Anderson Lopez. You'll hear me in the video lectures. When you have a question about the course, don't hesitate to review my contact information and reach out. The week 3 content will acclimate you to the course, and remember to navigate the content using the modules button, which will better prepare you for weekly assignments. The first bit of reading in week 3 is chapter 2. This reading includes core class concepts like communication and culture. As the textbook reading notes, we're all part of different cultures. A question to consider: how do the online co-cultures you're part of differ from your other co-cultures? This first reading brings up some compelling questions, as you can see on the screen. I advise reviewing textbook questions and considering them when you're drafting your weekly assignments. Next, the second reading this week is Chapter 6, Effective Listening. Consider how you listen or maybe don't listen to others. But instead of just reviewing this reading or me talking about it, I want you to consider a scenario, and this is optional, of course. You don't have to write anything down, but consider a recent situation when you feel someone was not listening to you or the opposite of that. I can recall something similar to this scenario, and most likely you can too. Maybe you feel heard in this situation, or maybe you don't. So lock that scenario in your mind. Now, with that scenario, let's review types of barriers to effective listening. The reading will review many types of these barriers, and we're about to review some other common types, and these may overlap, and that's okay. There's also a video linked in the announcement that describes 6 popular effective barriers to listening. And I say popular because they're common. Basically, the video lists these 6 common types of barriers to effective listening. And with those types in mind, and maybe you already knew about them but couldn't put a name to them, revisit that scenario I asked you about at the beginning of the video. Someone wasn't listening to you recently or vice versa. For my story, for this scenario, I wasn't really listening to someone that I know. My husband, he loves to share work stories, and I love hearing his work stories, but sometimes I'm just that kind of person who becomes too focused on the details. And we know from that previous slide about types that it's one of the barriers to effective listening. While it seems like this could be helpful focusing on the details, it can be damaging in a way because you're not listening. You're not understanding or hearing the person, maybe. And then sometimes that person just wants to be heard, to be understood. They want you, the listener, to be empathetic rather than doing all of that. For my husband's story, I just kept picking away at the story by asking more questions to get more details. And then by the end of that, I lost the thread of what he was saying. And then I asked him to repeat some of the stuff. He looked a little defeated and frustrated, as if to say to me, I just told you all of this. I don't think he wanted me to know the details per se. He just wanted to vent. And my need to focus on the details prevented that. So think about your story, this recent occurrence of listening or not listening. Which type of barrier applies to you or to the other person that wasn't listening to you? Was it distraction, focusing on the details, preoccupation? They didn't like the topic, or were you focused on what you wanted to say? Could have been the speaker. Maybe you don't like them. And it's not always common for us to consider how we can listen to someone better, but that's what this module is about. And that's what the scenario is about. Through action, the scenario is asking you to play this out in your head. Based on the type of barrier, kind of how I was self-reflective with my story, the listening situation you conjure up about your life Can you describe that situation differently? Can you see it in a different light? If someone was telling you a story and you were preoccupied, maybe cut yourself a little slack. Depending on what happened that day, maybe you had a right to be preoccupied. Using the readings and what you already practice with listening, consider how to mitigate these listening barriers and also how you can have more empathy for yourself and for others so that you can illustrate these tools for effective listening. Moreover, because of the field that you're entering, or maybe you're already in it, how might these concepts apply to your career path? Of course, effective listening is important to any job, but in healthcare, how might it be important specifically? With listening, it might seem easy, like, oh, I know the barriers, I'm fine, or I'm a great listener, I don't need to think about the barriers. But if we're honest with ourselves, it's not necessarily easy to listen effectively. But with a little bit of introspection and acknowledging our poor habits, we can build that skill of effective listening. Now that we discussed the major concepts and readings this week, let's discuss the two assignments that you have. You have only two assignments due, but one of them is a major one. The first assignment is a discussion board titled Effective Listening. The forum asks you to consider your own experiences in context with the lecture material that we just talked about. You can even use the scenario from the lecture if that helps you construct your post. In your discussion post, if you reference any quotes or paraphrases from the reading or some of the other supplemental material, make sure you cite your sources correctly, and this includes a formatted in-text citation and a reference entry for the source. For the forum, know that one initial post addressing all the questions is due before 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time Wednesday, and your two peer responses are due before 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time Sunday. Points are going to be deducted each day. The initial post is late, and that's 5 points per day after Wednesday. And after Sunday passes, any comments or initial posts are going to go ungraded. There aren't any word counts to meet for the forums unless otherwise noted. So a comprehensive post means you should answer all the questions in the assignment guidelines, use full sentences, and strive to refer to at least one outside reading or reading from the module. Similarly, when you respond to peers later in the week, strive for substance instead of compliments or you're right. Try to reply to them by comparing and contrasting against another point. You don't have to do any of the things that you see on screen when you respond to your peers. But if you do, this can help avoid empty peer responses and it can bolster your grade. So the last assignment is the first major project due for the course, and it's called Project 1. The purpose of this project is to engage with scholarly sources while also increasing your own cultural competency. The assignment has two parts, and let's review the first part. That first part of the assignment, it's about finding a source from a peer-reviewed scholarly article. Use the Joyce Online Library and search for an article focusing on intercultural communication. Once you find an article that you like you can see on the left-hand top of the screen, save the reference detail for the article. There's always a citation button. And then as you can see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, there's that citation once I clicked that button. Doing this early on makes it easier because you won't have to find the reference later. After you read that article, grab the citation for it. Write a paper critically analyzing the article. A critical analysis paper is not a book report. Rather, it's you, the researcher, finding the thesis or the central purpose of the article, and then you explain it. Additionally, you're going to identify the subtopics or claims made throughout the article. So without recapping the entire article, you're essentially identifying what's important about the article. Mainly, what is the central idea and what were 3 or 4 major topics, claims, or arguments that the author made throughout this piece. There's also a template you can use when constructing your paper about the article. Refer to the template found in the assignment guidelines, as it will help you construct a more organized draft, as you can see from the sample template found on the screen. The second part of Project 1 is the narrated presentation. It's recapping the important parts of your critical analysis paper. This presentation should feature visuals and audio narration via a recording, a lot like this video lecture. Think of the narrated presentation like an abridged version of your paper. This is similar to when a complex book or even a book series is adapted to a shortened film version. Some of the detail or nuance might be lost, but the major ideas survive. However, your presentation should be much shorter than a film or any of my video lectures. The length of your presentation should be at least 6 minutes, but not longer than 10 minutes. You'll only be required to include 3 to 5 content slides, as the title does not count towards this requirement. On the assignment page, there are other details for what these slides can and should cover, as you can see pictured on the screen. Consider which platform you're going to choose for the presentation. There are several choices, and for this particular presentation, I chose PowerPoint to create the visual portion, and I took care to use the design tips that PowerPoint was offering me. I recorded this presentation by screen sharing with Zoom, and then I uploaded that to YouTube. If you use Canva, there's a present and record feature that makes all of this a lot easier. I believe I used Canva for last week's video lecture, but also Kaltura is another option for creating the visuals and then recording your narration. I don't know if Kaltura will create visuals, but I know it makes narrate or recording a lot easier. Consider the design of your visual presentation for Project 1. Avoid too many colors. Try to use a pre-made template from Google or Canva that's free. You want the design of the presentation to stay consistent across the board. Then you choose 1 or 2 colors and stick to them, like maybe a color gradient across the entire presentation, like different shades of orange. When you're creating a visual presentation, balancing the right amount of text and images is important. To start, nobody wants you to have too much text and then read from the text. Your transcript will relate what's important and what's not important. Additionally, mixing font types is confusing. You're already narrating each slide. Your narrative or your transcript serves not only to explain the content of the slides, but to expand upon the content you've provided. Adding too much text can take the focus off what you're saying. Therefore, the less text you use on certain slides, the better. Add bullet points to slides when you plan on adding text. Stay consistent by using only 1 or 2 font type sizes and colors, like we talked about. Avoid using highlighting or white text against a dark or light background, unless you're going to add a shadow layer over the background to mute the color, like we're going to see on the next slide. Remember to add captions for non-decorative figures. Explain in your transcript why you included a particular image that's important in some way. For instance, the image on the screen is decorative, but if I added it because it's important to my presentation, I would add a caption as seen on the screen. Then in my transcript, I would mention why the man holding the phone represented a pivotal point to the article that I'm recapping. Additionally, in a visual presentation, avoid too many decorative images that have no point. Like the dude on the screen, if he wasn't representative of something to do with my article, I would choose a different image or a background. Avoid skewed, distorted, or blurry images and strive to only use copyright-free images. To stay on track with what you're narrating, I suggest using your critical essay to help you construct a separate transcript for your narrated presentation. Pick and choose important bits and then include that on a numbered or bullet point list to help you move from slide to slide. Keeping a transcript for narrated presentations helps you practice, it lets you stay organized, and it cuts down on lengthy presentations because you already know what you're going to say. You should be citing sources within the visual presentation and your narration, thus oral citations must be used when narrating. There are other details and requirements about the project on the assignment page. Please make sure to review the instructions in full. Additionally, familiarize yourself with week 3 by exploring Canvas. Ask me questions when needed, and I hope you found this lecture helpful. Have a great rest of your week.